We found the trail again, right before it disappeared. Forever. Ray Blackfoot's weathered hands trembled slightly as he lowered his binoculars. Through the crisp Montana air, he could see the yellow surveyor flags fluttering like alien butterflies across the sacred hillside. The developers had moved faster than expected. His jaw tightened as he calculated. This would be the last season the ancient trail remained intact. The trail had sustained his people for centuries, leading to the hidden valley where elk gathered before winter's grip tightened. Without it, the Blackfoot family's hunting tradition would vanish. Another piece of heritage swallowed by progress. A wolf howled in the distance, its mournful cry carrying through the pines. Ray understood its lament. The wilderness was shrinking for them both. Inside his cabin, Ray stared at his phone. 3 years had passed since he'd spoken to Michael. His son had traded traditional knowledge for law books, reservation life, for city comfort. But Michael needed to witness this final hunt, needed to carry this memory forward when Ray was gone. "Dad?" Michael's voice crackled through the line, surprised. "Everything okay?" Ray cleared his throat. "The developers, they're moving in. This season will be the last for the old trail." Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken regrets. "I need you here," Ray finally said. "One last hunt. The old way." In his Missoula office, Michael stared at the irony on his desk. Environmental briefs opposing a development not unlike the one threatening his father's hunting grounds. Outside his window, the city hummed, comfortable and controlled. He'd left the reservation to escape the hardship, the uncertainty of living by nature's rules. "When?" Michael asked, already knowing he would go. "Tomorrow. First light." 200 miles away, in the Bitterroot Range, an early storm front built strength. The elk sensed it coming, their movements growing restless as barometric pressure dropped. They began shifting away from their traditional valley, adapting as they had for millennia. When Michael's car pulled up at dawn, Ray noted his son's expensive boots, unbroken leather that would punish feet accustomed to office carpets. Good. Some lessons required pain. "You remember how to track?" Ray asked instead of a greeting. Michael nodded, though both knew his skills had dulled. "Like riding a bike, right?" Ray handed him a worn rifle, his grandfather's Remington. "We'll see." What neither man voiced was their shared fear, not of the hunt's dangers, but of failing each other again. As they loaded packs with minimal supplies, Ray glanced skyward at gathering clouds. The weather would turn brutal, testing them both beyond reconciliation's simple discomforts. "There's a biologist up there," Ray mentioned, setting cameras, studying why the elk are changing patterns. "Scientific approach," Michael said, a hint of approval in his voice. "Our approach worked for 1,000 years, Ray countered. As they shouldered their packs, neither man noticed the lone wolf watching from the ridgeline, nor the dark wall of clouds building beyond it, harbingers of the ordeal to come. What began as a symbolic journey would soon become a fight for survival against the mountain's merciless judgment. The hunt had begun, but nature had set its own terms. Cassie Mitchell cursed as she examined the memory card from her trail camera. The elk herd had vanished from their traditional migration route 2 weeks earlier than last year, which was already a month earlier than historical records indicated. Climate change was accelerating, the data undeniable. She packed up her equipment as the wind strengthened, carrying the metallic scent of approaching snow. Her research grant required another month of data, but the mountains had their own timeline. Already the temperature had dropped 10 degrees since dawn. The sound of voices made her reach for the bear spray at her hip. Encounters this deep in the backcountry rarely happened by chance. Ray Blackfoot emerged first, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone born to the mountains. Behind him, his son, the resemblance unmistakable, though the younger man moved with city-dweller hesitation, already breathing hard from the climb. "You're on tribal hunting grounds," Ray stated flatly, eyes narrowing at her equipment. "Public land, technically," Cassie corrected, then regretted her tone. "I'm tracking elk migration patterns. They're changing faster than our models predicted." Michael stepped forward. "You're with the university?" "Wildlife Service." She extended a hand. "Cassie Mitchell." Ray ignored the introduction. The elk left early, heading northwest instead of to the eastern valley. Cassie's eyebrows rose. "How could you know that?" "My cameras only confirmed it yesterday." A thin smile crossed Ray's face. "The bent grass there," he pointed, "tracks there and droppings there. 3 days old. 15, maybe 20 animals." Michael looked where his father indicated, seeing nothing but wilderness. "Mind if I join you?" Cassie asked. "My research could help protect these migration corridors." Ray's refusal died on his lips as he noticed fresh claw marks on a nearby pine. A grizzly, male, agitated. The beast had claimed this territory, and 3 humans would fare better than 2 if confronted. "Your choice if you can keep up," he conceded. "We're not stopping for science." 200 miles away, Thomas Walsh frowned at the ecological assessment on his tablet. Something didn't add up in the migration data. The resort's placement depended on accurate wildlife patterns, and lawsuits would be inevitable if the projections were wrong. "Cancel my meetings," he told his assistant. "I'm flying to Montana." By mid-afternoon, the trio had covered 7 miles of punishing terrain. Michael's fancy boots had raised angry blisters, each step becoming torment. He refused to complain, but Ray noticed his limping gait. "We make camp here," Ray announced, though daylight remained. They worked silently, erecting shelters as the wind intensified. The clouds descended, transforming distant peaks into ghostly silhouettes. That night, as temperatures plunged below freezing, Ray performed the traditional blessing for tomorrow's hunt. Cassie watched with anthropological interest, while Michael shifted uncomfortably, caught between worlds. "The elk have changed their path," Ray explained, settling beside the small fire. "They've abandoned the valley they've used for generations." "Adaptive strategy," Cassie offered. "My data shows—" "The animals know before your cameras," Ray interrupted. "Just as my ancestors knew before your science." The fire crackled between them, casting long shadows as the first snowflakes began to fall. None of them realized that miles away, Thomas Walsh's small plane was being diverted by the approaching storm toward the same mountains where an enormous grizzly driven from its normal hunting grounds by the changing climate, was already stalking their campsite. Dawn broke with painful brilliance across fresh snow, 3 inches deep and still falling. Ray emerged first, breath clouding as he studied the transformed landscape. The cold had settled into his joints overnight, a familiar ache that whispered warnings of age. "Tracks," he called, kneeling beside a depression nearly filled with fresh powder. Michael stumbled from his tent, eyes puffy from poor sleep. His blistered feet had stiffened overnight, each step reigniting yesterday's pain. "Elk?" he asked hopefully. Ray shook his head. "Grizzly, male, 400 pounds at least." He pointed to claw marks on a nearby tree, fresh sap glistening, marking territory. "Hungry." Cassie joined them, her scientific detachment momentarily shaken. "That's unusually large." "The big ones used to stay higher up," Ray explained. "Now they follow the elk down as winters start earlier." He studied the mountains, where visibility diminished with each minute as the snowfall intensified. "We move now. Stay between me and Michael." They packed quickly, the bear's presence adding urgency. Ray led them upward along a ridge that appeared identical to the surrounding terrain, yet he moved with certainty, occasionally stopping to point out nearly invisible signs. "There," he indicated a broken twig bent in a particular direction. "And there." A depression in the moss beneath the snow. The old ones marked the way for those who know how to see. Michael struggled to discern the signs, fragments of childhood lessons, returning too slowly. 20 years ago, on this same trail, Ray had first taught him to read the land's subtle language. "Remember," Ray said, as if hearing his thoughts, "our people have followed this path for 12 generations. Before that, the Salish. The trail remains even when the markers change." The omniscient spirits of the mountains watched as Ray's ancestors moved through the same passes. Different men in different times, yet performing the same actions, reading the same signs, generation after generation. By midday, they reached the ridge overlooking what should have been the Elk's gathering valley. Empty, untouched snow confirmed what Ray already knew. "They've changed their pattern," Cassie said, checking her GPS. "This doesn't match any of our projected models." Ray nodded grimly. The cold came early. 3 years running. "They've adapted." He pointed northwest, toward harsher terrain. "They've gone there, where the new development is planned." Michael spotted a yellow surveyor's stake half buried in snow. Something twisted in his chest. Anger, grief. He couldn't name it. This was more than just a hunting ground. It was the physical embodiment of his heritage. As they traversed the ridge, the wind strengthened, driving crystalline shards of ice against exposed skin. Michael's legs burned with exhaustion, each step a negotiation between pain and necessity. "We need shelter," Cassie called over the mounting gale. "Storm's getting worse." Ray pointed to a rock formation ahead. "There's a cave. We used it when—" His words vanished as a deafening crack split the air. 50 yards ahead, a massive pine, overburdened with snow, collapsed across their path. And behind it, startled by the noise, and now facing them directly, stood the grizzly. For 3 eternal seconds, the bear assessed them, black eyes calculating. Then it rose to its full height, 9 feet of muscle and fury, and roared. "Don't run," Ray commanded, slowly raising his rifle. But the bear dropped to all fours and charged, covering ground with terrifying speed. Ray's first shot went wide as his cold fingers slipped. Michael fumbled with his grandfather's Remington, the unfamiliar safety mechanism refusing to disengage. Cassie's bear spray canister emerged too slowly. The collision was inevitable. Nature's judgment rendered in teeth and claws. The bear's charge halted mid-stride as Ray's second shot cracked through the howling wind. Not a kill. The bullet grazed the massive shoulder, but enough to make the grizzly reconsider. It swerved, crashing through underbrush, leaving a crimson trail in the pristine snow. "It'll be back," Ray said, ejecting the spent shell. "Wounded bears don't forgive." Michael's hands trembled as he finally disengaged the safety. Too late. The shame burned hotter than his exhaustion. His father had faced death while he fumbled with basics. "The cave," Cassie urged, her scientific calm fractured by the near-death encounter. "Now." They scrambled over the fallen pine, following Ray to a narrow opening in the granite face. Inside, the temperature rose marginally, enough to feel the full weight of their sweat-soaked clothes in the sudden stillness. "We've lost too much time," Ray said, checking his watch. "Storm's worsening. We're trapped until it passes." Miles away, Thomas Walsh gripped the armrests of his rented Jeep as it fishtailed on the icy road. The pilot had refused to land at the small regional airport, diverting to Missoula instead. Determined to see the property before finalizing permits, Walsh had ignored warnings about driving into the mountains during a storm advisory. Now, as visibility dropped to mere yards, he realized his mistake. The Jeep slid sideways, then lurched to a halt against a snowbank. The engine sputtered and died. No cell service. No passing vehicles. Just the relentless snow and plummeting temperature. Walsh grabbed his inadequate city coat and the emergency kit from the glove compartment. The nearest ranger station was 3 miles back. He could freeze waiting for rescue, or freeze trying to reach help. The mountain offered no third option. In the cave, Ray built a small fire from dead wood gathered near the entrance. The smoke mostly vented through cracks above, though enough remained to sting their eyes. They huddled close, sharing body heat as the storm escalated to a shrieking fury outside. "We need to dress that," Ray said, nodding toward Michael's bloody sock. The blisters had burst, raw flesh now grinding against leather with each step. Michael removed his boot, wincing as fabric tore away from wounded skin. Ray applied an herbal salve from his pack, a family recipe that smelled of spruce and bear fat. "The trail's gone cold," Michael said. "The elk could be miles away by now." Ray shook his head. "They'll shelter like us. When the storm breaks, their tracks will be fresh." Cassie checked her satellite device. "The forecast shows this system stalled for at least 24 hours. We have supplies for 2 days, maximum." "We have the land," Ray corrected. "It provides for those who know how to ask." As if answering his words, a tremendous crash sounded near the cave entrance. All 3 grabbed for weapons, expecting the wounded bear's return. Instead, they found a massive branch had collapsed, revealing a winter grouse trapped beneath, killed instantly by the impact. "Dinner," Ray said simply. That night, as they ate smoke-flavored bird meat, the temperature outside plunged to 20 below. The wind drove snow horizontally across the landscape, erasing all human presence. Inside, they rotated sleeping positions, two resting, while one tended the life-preserving fire. During his watch, Michael studied his father's face in the flickering light. The stoic features concealed exhaustion. Ray had been limping too, something he'd hidden from them both. "Your ankle," Michael whispered, not wanting to wake Cassie. Ray's eyes opened. "Small sprain when I shot." "Nothing." But Michael saw the swelling beneath the leather wrapping. By morning, Ray would struggle to walk, a potential death sentence in these conditions, with a wounded bear hunting them, and the storm showing no signs of relenting. Outside, Walsh collapsed for the third time, his legs numb beyond feeling. The ranger station remained an impossible distance away. As consciousness began to fade, the yellow beam of his flashlight caught something unexpected in the swirling white. A cave entrance, and within it, the faint orange glow of salvation. Morning arrived with deceptive calm. The storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed world. 3 feet of snow blanketing everything. Tree branches bowed under crystalline weight. The air so clear it hurt to breathe. Ray struggled to his feet, pain flashing across his features before he could mask it. The ankle had swollen to twice its normal size, mottled purple beneath his weathered skin. "You can't walk on that," Cassie said, medical training overriding diplomacy. "We have a day, maybe less, before the next system hits," Ray replied. "The elk will be moving, and the bear will have our scent." Michael made the decision. "I'll lead. You taught me enough." Ray's pride warred with practicality. Finally, he nodded, handing Michael his own knife, the one his father had given him. "You'll need this to read sign beneath snow this deep." They fashioned a walking stick for Ray, then ventured into the blinding white expanse. Michael moved ahead, scanning for subtle depressions where elk might have passed. The physical signs were buried, forcing him to rely on deeper knowledge. Where would hungry animals go after a storm? He closed his eyes, remembering his father's lessons from 2 decades ago. Elk would seek southern exposures where wind had swept snow from vegetation. They'd want running water, not frozen ponds. "There," he pointed toward a ridgeline. "They'll cross there, heading for the valley beyond." Ray's approving nod carried more weight than any spoken praise. They moved painfully slow, each step a battle against gravity. Ray's labored breathing betrayed the agony of his injury, though he never complained. Cassie shadowed him, ready to provide support when pride permitted it. By midday, they reached the ridge Michael had indicated. Below stretched an unfamiliar valley, one they hadn't planned to hunt. And there, moving like brown shadows against the white, was the elk herd. At least 30 animals pawing through snow to reach buried grass. "They've adapted," Ray whispered. "Found a new sanctuary." Michael raised his rifle, then hesitated. "Which one?" Ray pointed to a mature bull standing guard at the herd's edge. "Clean shot through the lungs. Don't wound him." Michael steadied his breathing, feeling his heartbeat slow as he aligned the sights. The crosshairs settled on the bull's chest, just behind the front shoulder. He exhaled halfway, then gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the valley. The bull staggered, took 3 steps, then collapsed. The rest of the herd bolted, disappearing into the trees with supernatural coordination. "Clean," Ray said, pride evident beneath his stoic exterior. They made their way down to the fallen elk. Ray guided Michael through the sacred responsibilities: the offering of tobacco, the whispered thanks to the animal's spirit, the precise cutting that honored the sacrifice. Cassie documented silently, understanding she was witnessing something few outsiders ever saw. As they worked to process the meat, a sound made them freeze: the unmistakable crunch of approaching footsteps. Ray reached for his rifle, movement slowed by his injury. Instead of the expected bear, a man stumbled into the clearing, expensively dressed but hypothermic, his face wind-burned and disoriented. "Help," was all he managed before collapsing. "Walsh?" Cassie recognized him from research funding meetings. "The developer?" Ray's expression hardened, but he was already moving toward the fallen man. "Get his wet clothes off. Michael, the emergency blanket." As they worked to save the life of the man threatening their hunting grounds, the wounded grizzly watched from the tree line, patient in its hunger, waiting for the inevitable moment when the humans would lower their guard. The bull elk's blood steamed in the snow, a beacon calling to predators for miles around. They had an hour, maybe less, before the wilderness rendered its verdict on their intrusion. They worked frantically to process the elk, conscious of time's deadly passage. Michael's knife moved with increasing confidence, separating meat from bone, while Ray directed from a seated position, his injured ankle now too painful to bear weight. Walsh drifted in and out of consciousness, wrapped in emergency blankets near the small fire they'd risked building. His core temperature remained dangerously low despite their efforts. "We need shelter," Cassie said, scanning the darkening sky. "Night's coming, and so is the next storm." "And the bear," Michael added, catching a familiar scent on the shifting wind. Ray pointed to a cluster of pines, half a mile distant. "There's an old line shack there. Trappers used it when this was still wild country." The unspoken question hung between them: how to transport both the meat and the injured developer with their own depleted strength. They fashioned a travois from pine branches, securing the most valuable cuts of meat and loading Walsh on top. Ray insisted on walking despite Cassie's objections, each step visibly torturous. "Movement or death," he said simply. They left the remaining meat elevated in a tree, a necessary sacrifice to whatever predators claimed it. As they departed, Michael glimpsed movement at the forest edge, the grizzly watching with terrible patience. Halfway to the shack, Walsh regained partial awareness. "Where?" he mumbled through bluish lips. "Safe," Michael answered, though the word felt hollow with the bear shadowing their trail. Walsh's eyes found Ray's face. "You're Blackfoot. From the reservation." Ray didn't respond, focused entirely on the agony of each forward step. "Your land," Walsh continued, consciousness bringing recognition. "My project. Never meant, never saw. Save your strength, Cassie advised. The line shack appeared as dusk smothered the valley. A crude one-room structure, half collapsed on one side, but still offering partial shelter. They barricaded the door with firewood, covered broken windows with emergency blankets, and built a fire in the ancient stone hearth. As night fell, temperatures plummeted again. The bears' growls occasionally penetrated the howling wind, testing their defenses, seeking weakness. Walsh sat up, stronger after drinking hot broth made from elk meat. "Why save me?" he asked Ray directly. "You know who I am. What I'm doing to your hunting grounds." Ray's weathered face revealed nothing. "Out here, we're just men. The mountain doesn't care about property deeds." "I saw the elk," Walsh said. "How they've moved to the valley, where the resort's main lodge is planned." "They're adapting," Cassie explained, professional detachment returning with improved conditions. "Climate change is forcing new migration patterns. My research shows they've abandoned traditional valleys for exactly where you're building." "I didn't know," Walsh admitted. "You didn't ask the right people," Ray countered. Outside, the bear charged the door, testing its strength. Wood splintered, but held. Michael aimed his rifle at the entrance, prepared for the barricade to fail. "If we survive," Walsh said after the bear retreated, "what would you propose instead?" The question hung between them as the storm intensified to a shrieking fury, battering their fragile shelter. None slept that night, taking turns watching the door and maintaining the fire that stood between survival and freezing. By dawn, the bear had vanished, and the storm had passed. But Ray's ankle had worsened, black tendrils of infection visible beneath the skin. "We need to get him out," Cassie whispered to Michael. "Sepsis is setting in." Michael studied the valley below, calculating routes. "We're 12 miles from the nearest road. He can't make it." Walsh overheard. "My satellite phone," he said, retrieving a device from his inner pocket. "Battery's low, but might have enough for one call." As Michael dialed for rescue, Ray watched through the window as the sun illuminated the valley where the elk had found their new sanctuary. The same valley marked for destruction on Walsh's development plans. The wilderness had rendered its judgment, but the outcome remained unwritten. 3 months passed before Ray could walk without assistance. The infection had nearly claimed his leg, antibiotics barely turning the tide. He sat on his cabin porch, watching February snow dust the distant mountains where they'd nearly died. The certified letter arrived that morning, official notification of the development project's modification. He hadn't opened it yet, skeptical of promises made by a man facing death. Michael's truck appeared on the dirt road, kicking up powder as it approached. He'd visited weekly during Ray's recovery, their relationship healing alongside the physical wound. "It's official," Michael announced, emerging with a leather document case. The tribal council voted to accept Walsh's revised proposal. Ray accepted the papers with weathered hands. The development had been reduced by 60%. The critical elk migration corridor, now designated as protected land, with permanent tribal hunting rights. Most significant, the ancient trail would remain untouched, preserved for future generations. "Your legal work?" Ray asked. Michael nodded. "And Cassie's research. Walsh didn't fight us. He led the redesign himself. The mountain had changed them all, stripping away pretenses until only truth remained. Near death had a way of clarifying priorities. He's coming next week, Michael continued. Wants to walk the alternative site with us. Ray's eyebrow raised slightly, the closest he came to expressing surprise. Says he needs our knowledge to build in harmony with the land, Michael added. The first week of autumn found them on the trail again, following the same path, but with new understanding. Ray moved slower, but steadier, his limp a permanent reminder of nature's power. Michael led occasionally, his city hesitation replaced with earned confidence. Cassie joined them, now documenting the elk's adaptation for an expanded conservation initiative. And Walsh accompanied them, not as adversary, but as student, learning to read the land's subtle language before reshaping any part of it. They reached the overlook where Michael had taken the shot nearly a year before. Below, the elk herd had returned, now numbering close to 50. The animals had adapted to the changing climate, finding new patterns in an ancient dance. You were right, Walsh admitted to Ray. This land speaks if you know how to listen. Ray nodded, accepting the acknowledgement without comment. He'd lived long enough to know that actions revealed more than words. Michael watched a young bull separate from the herd, next year's leader learning independence, the cycle continuing despite human interference. When they reached the line shack where they'd sheltered from death, they found it refurbished, roof repaired, walls reinforced, stocked with emergency supplies for future hunters or travelers in need. Your work? Ray asked Walsh. The developer shook his head. The tribe's youth group. Your son organized them. Something shifted in Ray's expression, pride tinged with recognition that the future would unfold differently than the past, yet still carry its essential truths. On their final evening, Ray performed the traditional blessing for successful hunts to come. This time, Michael joined him without hesitation, the words familiar on his tongue. Cassie documented respectfully, her science enriched by traditional knowledge. Walsh observed silently, understanding his role as witness to something ancient and unbreakable. Later, as Michael sighted his rifle on another clean kill, Ray felt the presence of his ancestors watching, approving of how the old ways had adapted without being lost. The trail had disappeared, then re-emerged transformed, like the elk, like the hunters themselves. As they processed the season's offering, Michael's young daughter waited at home, already learning from her grandfather's stories. Next year, she would join them, adding her footprints to those stretching back through time immemorial. The wilderness had rendered its judgment. Adaptation without forgetting. New trails honoring ancient paths,